Point Pleasant, West Virginia, was a quiet town nestled along the banks of the Ohio River, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and secrets rarely stayed hidden. Yet, in the fall of 1966, a chilling rumor began to ripple through the town, one that would forever change its peaceful rhythm. It all began on a cold October night when locals reported seeing a strange creature soaring across the sky. They described it as a winged figure with glowing red eyes, too large to be any bird, and far too sinister to be natural. It was John Klein, a young reporter from the nearby city, who first heard whispers of the sightings. Curious and sensing a story that could make his career, he drove to Point Pleasant, notebook in hand, determined to uncover the truth. As he arrived, the residents were tight-lipped, but their fearful glances spoke volumes. At the local diner, he overheard snippets of conversations, farmers claiming their livestock had been spooked, fishermen swearing they had seen a shadow pass over the river, and even children insisting they had seen the Mothman staring at them from the tree line. The next day, John spoke to one of the witnesses, a middle-aged couple who had lived in the town for decades. They recounted the night they were driving home along Route 62 when a massive creature flew above their car. It was enormous, the husband said, voice trembling. Wings like a bat, eyes that glowed red. It followed us for miles. I've never been so scared in my life. His wife added, and the sound. It wasn't like anything I've ever heard, a shriek that rattled your bones. John scribbled furiously, realizing this story was far stranger than anything he had imagined. By evening, the town seemed tense, shops closed early, and the streets were eerily silent. Locals whispered about the omen that the creature brought. Many were convinced that the sightings were a harbinger of doom. John stayed at a small motel near the river, hoping to catch a glimpse of the Mothman himself. Around midnight, the wind howled through the trees, and the river reflected a pale silver light under the moon. That's when he saw it. A massive shadow with wings stretching wider than a car, gliding silently over the treetops. Its red eyes pierced the darkness, fixed on him for a moment that felt like eternity. Heart pounding, John fumbled for his camera, but the creature vanished before he could capture it. The experience left him shaken, yet more determined. He realized this wasn't just a story. It was something alive, something terrifying, something the town was desperately trying to ignore. That night, as the wind whispered through the room, John felt certain that the Mothman was not merely a legend. It was watching, waiting, and perhaps it was only the beginning of something far more sinister.
The following morning, Point Pleasant seemed normal, almost painfully so. The streets were quiet, the river shimmered in the early sunlight, and children played without fear. Yet beneath the surface, an unease lingered. News of the sightings had spread like wildfire, drawing journalists, UFO enthusiasts, and thrill seekers from all over West Virginia and beyond. John Klein found himself in the middle of a growing frenzy, his notebook filled with witness accounts, sketches of the creature, and frantic observations of its behavior. Locals warned him not to wander alone, citing strange disappearances and unexplainable accidents that had begun occurring since the first sighting. A fisherman named Harold Thompson reluctantly told John about the night his boat capsized despite calm waters. "I swear," Harold muttered, eyes darting nervously. "Something flew over the river, wings so wide they blocked the moonlight, and then my boat just tipped. No waves, no storm, just tipped." His hand shook as he recounted the story, leaving John with an unsettling sense that these incidents were connected. As night fell, John decided to investigate the old TNT area, a remote section of the riverbank abandoned after World War II. It was said to be haunted by more than memories of explosives. Locals claimed strange lights danced across the hills and animals fled in terror. He set up a small camp near the tree line, hoping to observe the creature without being seen. The air was thick with fog, and the silence of the abandoned terrain was almost suffocating. Hours passed with nothing but the distant howl of a coyote. Then, a faint rustling reached his ears. At first, he dismissed it as wind, but the sound grew louder, deliberate. He felt an icy grip of fear and instinctively raised his flashlight. Across the clearing, two enormous red eyes reflected back at him. The creature was closer than he expected. Perched atop a ridge, wings folded like a predator ready to strike. John froze, unsure whether to flee or confront it. The Mothman tilted his head, regarding him with an intelligence that was unnerving. Suddenly, the wind picked up, carrying whispers that seemed to echo from nowhere. Shadows moved unnaturally, twisting along the tree line, and John realized the entire forest seemed alive, watching, reacting to the Mothman's movements. Panic surged, but his curiosity rooted him in place. He raised his camera, capturing a single blurry shot before the creature leapt into the night sky, vanishing as silently as it appeared. John returned to town, shaken and exhausted. People whispered about his encounter, some calling him brave, others foolish. But the town's tension was undeniable. Strange accidents were increasing. Car crashes, unexplained fires, and livestock deaths all coincided with sightings. Fear had taken hold, and John sensed a growing dread among the townspeople. The Mothman wasn't just a creature of legend, it was a harbinger, a shadow that seemed to bring misfortune wherever it appeared. That night, John lay in his motel bed, staring at the ceiling. The red eyes haunted him, refusing to fade. Somewhere in the darkness of Point Pleasant, the Mothman waited. And he knew one truth that chilled him to his core. The Mothman wasn't done with the town.
By mid-November, Point Pleasant was gripped by a growing sense of dread. The town, once lively and tight-knit, had become a place of whispered fears and shuttered windows. Every new report of the Mothman seemed to bring with it a fresh disaster: freak car crashes, sudden fires, livestock mutilations, and most disturbingly, disappearances. People began to avoid traveling after dark, and those who did returned with wide-eyed tales of glowing red eyes hovering in the trees or above the roads. John Klein felt the tension every time he walked the streets with his notebook. He realized he was no longer merely documenting sightings, he was chronicling a slow, creeping terror. One evening, John went to speak with Connie Mills, a local woman whose husband had vanished a week prior. The story haunted the town. She described how her husband had gone fishing along the Ohio River near the TNT area and never returned. "I swear he wasn't drunk, and the boat was fine," she said, gripping a handkerchief tightly. "I heard something, like wings, just before he disappeared. He just vanished into the night." Her voice quavered as she recounted the eerie, unexplainable events. John noticed that every time she mentioned the Mothman, the room seemed to grow colder, the shadows stretching longer along the walls. The following night, John decided to drive the old Silver Bridge, which locals avoided after sunset. There had been whispers that the Mothman was often seen near bridges, and he wanted to see for himself if there was a connection. The wind howled through the steel girders, and the river below glistened with a ghostly silver light. As he approached the midpoint of the bridge, headlights of an approaching car illuminated the outline of the creature, perched atop a support beam. Its wings were folded against its massive frame, eyes glowing like burning coals in the dark. Suddenly, John noticed other shadows along the bridge, something unnatural in their movements. The car behind him honked, startling him, and the creature's red eyes shifted toward him. A bone-chilling shriek echoed across the river, vibrating through the metal structure of the bridge. Instinctively, he hit the gas, but the car jerked violently as though an unseen force resisted it. For a split second, he saw other figures in the shadows, twisted shapes with wings flickering in and out of the fog. They were watching him, testing him, warning him to leave. The experience left John shaken to his core. He barely made it back into town, but the incident became another story whispered among the residents. It was as if the Mothman was no longer just an apparition. Its presence brought calamity. Vehicles malfunctioned, lights exploded, even the river seemed restless whenever it appeared. John realized the creature's appearances were always followed by accidents, tragedies, and unexplained phenomena. The town had begun to understand what John feared most. The Mothman wasn't merely being seen, it was delivering messages in the language of fear and chaos. That night, as John typed up his notes in the dim light of the motel room, the shadows outside seemed to deepen. A tapping echoed against the window, soft at first, then louder, like wings brushing against glass. He froze. Slowly, the thought crept into his mind that the Mothman wasn't just a visitor. It was a warning, a herald of something larger and far more terrifying than anyone could comprehend.
By December, the fear in Point Pleasant had grown almost unbearable. The once friendly town had become a place of paranoia. Residents spoke in hushed tones, shutters remained closed after dusk, and even the bravest hunters avoided the outskirts near the TNT area. John Klein had been documenting every sighting, every accident, every whispered legend, but now he felt the story slipping beyond his control. The Mothman was no longer a phenomenon to report. It was a force the town seemed powerless to resist. One particularly bitter night, John ventured out again, this time with two locals, Carl and Raymond, who had claimed to see the creature near their homes. They carried flashlights, binoculars, and a healthy dose of fear. The wind cut through their jackets, carrying the faint scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. The men spoke in whispers as they approached the abandoned TNT area, recounting sightings they had experienced. A winged shadow gliding above their barns, glowing eyes staring from the tree line, and unexplainable noises that echoed like screams in the night. Hours passed in tense silence until a sudden movement in the sky caught their attention. There, silhouetted against the pale moon, was the Mothman, its wings spread wide, casting enormous shadows on the ground. John felt the hairs on the back of his neck rise as the creature's glowing red eyes locked onto him. It emitted a low, guttural shriek, a sound that seemed to penetrate the soul. Carl and Raymond froze, terror etched across their faces. The Mothman moved closer, gliding silently but with deliberate menace, as though it were hunting or delivering judgment. Suddenly, the forest erupted into chaos. Shadows moved unnaturally, twisting around the trees like living smoke. Birds scattered in a frenzy, and the sound of snapping branches filled the night. A massive gust of wind knocked John off his feet, and when he scrambled to his knees, he saw more of the creatures emerging from the darkness. They were like echoes of the Mothman, winged, red-eyed, and horrifyingly intelligent. Panic surged as one of the men screamed, and all three ran blindly through the forest, the sounds of wings and shrieks chasing them at every step. When they finally emerged onto the riverbank, gasping for air, they realized the bridge ahead was lit in a terrifying way. Cars had collided, and debris was strewn across the roadway. It seemed as though the presence of the Mothman directly caused disaster wherever it appeared. John's camera, which he had managed to keep clutched to his chest, had captured blurred images of the creatures as they moved with terrifying grace. He knew that these photographs, though unclear, would confirm what he had feared. The Mothman was real, and its appearances foretold calamity. The night ended in a chilling silence. The Mothman and his shadowy companions had vanished as suddenly as they had appeared, leaving only the destruction behind.
John returned to the motel, shaken and exhausted, his notes scattered across the desk. The town was now fully aware. The Mothman was no longer a mystery. It was a harbinger, and John understood with an icy certainty that the creature's visitations were building towards something far worse. The whispers among the townspeople were growing louder. It comes before disaster. As he lay awake that night, the wind howling outside, John felt the red eyes in his mind. They seemed to pierce the darkness, a reminder that the Mothman was always watching. And somewhere in the shadows of Point Pleasant, the creature waited patiently, ready to return.
By mid-December, Point Pleasant was a town under siege. Fear had become a constant companion, the air thick with whispers of the Mothman. Local authorities warned travelers to stay off the roads at night. Businesses closed early, and the town's once friendly streets were empty after dusk. John Klein, however, felt a grim determination. He had followed the trail of sightings and disasters for weeks and was convinced that the creature's appearances were more than random. They were a warning, a prelude to something catastrophic. He resolved to witness it one final time. On a bitterly cold night, John returned to the TNT area alone. The sky was a blanket of fog, and the Ohio River below reflected the dim glow of the moon. Every rustle of the wind through the trees sounded like whispered threats. He set up his camera, tripod ready, and waited, heart pounding with equal parts fear and anticipation. Hours passed in silence, the only sound the faint lapping of the river against the bank. Just as he was beginning to doubt his resolve, a shadow appeared in the mist. Two glowing red eyes cut through the darkness, piercing him with an intensity that froze him in place. The Mothman emerged fully, wings spread like a dark storm, gliding silently over the riverbank. John's breath caught in his throat as the creature landed atop an old abandoned building. Its gaze seemed almost intelligent, assessing him, warning him. The air around him grew heavy, the temperature dropping suddenly, as if the creature carried the winter with it. John raised his camera, hands trembling, and snapped several pictures. The flash illuminated the Mothman for a brief second, enough for John to see its grotesque, human-like features hidden beneath the wings and the unnatural contortion of its limbs. Then came the sound, a shriek unlike any human voice, a chilling wail that seemed to echo through the river valley and deep into John's bones. In that moment, John understood the pattern. The Mothman appeared before tragedy struck. He remembered the bridge, the car crashes, the disappearances, and the unexplainable accidents. It was not hunting the town, it was warning it. The creature's presence was a premonition, a symbol of doom that, if ignored, would be followed by calamity. Suddenly, the ground trembled slightly, and John realized a storm was approaching, not from the sky, but from the river itself. Trees swayed violently, and a distant rumble echoed through the hills. The Mothman spread his wings and ascended into the fog, circling above John. The red eyes glowed brighter, as if urging him to leave, to warn the town. Panic surged, and John ran toward the main road, heart hammering, hearing the rustle of wings in the mist behind him. He barely made it back to town, breathless, shaking, and carrying the weight of the warning the creature had given. In the following days, Point Pleasant suffered a series of mysterious disasters, bridge collapses, accidents, and sudden fires. The townspeople whispered about the Mothman with a mixture of fear and reverence, realizing that it was a dark messenger rather than a monster for sport. John's photographs were published in newspapers, sparking fascination and disbelief nationwide. Yet he never forgot the glowing eyes, the silent warning, and the way the creature had moved with both menace and purpose.